And we're live. Welcome everyone to another NPM Open RFC call. Today's date is Wednesday, August the 10th, 2022. We'll be following along in the agenda that was posted on issue 627 on the NPM RFC's repo. And for folks that have just joined, feel free to add yourselves to the meeting notes doc, which I've shared here in chat. Feel free to add notes. I'll do my best to take notes as we go along here. Quick reminder for folks on this call and newcomers as well. This call is live streamed and recorded on YouTube. And we ask that folks please abide by the code of conduct, which is posted in the RFC's, which is linked in the RFC's repo. The synopsis there is please be kind. As other folks are speaking, please raise your hand and we'll call on you to speak. And just please be kind and thoughtful as we're on these calls discussing these RFCs. Quick outline again of intentions, desired outcomes. The hope here with this call is to obviously discuss in-flight RFCs discussions and hopefully come to some rough consensus and move forward, adding new capabilities to the NPM CLI. As well, I want to give some space for folks in terms of any announcements that we've got this week. There's nothing on my end that I know of. I'm not sure if anybody else has announcements they'd like to share. If not, we can jump into quick introductions potentially. I know there's a bunch of new folks on the call. It might be good to just quickly go over who you are, where you're from, and yeah, your essentially interest here. I can start quickly. My name is Darcy Clark. I'm the NPM engineering manager, or NPM CLI engineering manager, as well as GitHub CLI engineering manager here at GitHub. Been running this call for about 3 years. That's a bit about me. I'm not sure if the folks from my team also want to go here and quickly say hi, or we can go essentially in whatever order we deem fit. Fritzy, do you want to say hi quick?
Yeah, hi, I'm Nathan Fritzy. I work under Darcy at GitHub on the NPM CLI team. Been with GitHub for about a year. And that's me.
I know Gar is in the middle of cutting a release for us, but I'm not sure if he's there. Gar, do you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, I'm Gar. I'm on the CLI team. I'm doing the release this week, so my mental presence here, at least for the next 15, is going to be light.
Awesome. And Nilf, I'm not sure if you're here. Do you want to give a quick intro?
I am. Hello. I'm Nelf or Nathan Lafreniere. I'm also a member of the NPM CLI team working at GitHub. I've been working on NPM itself for, what, 5 years now, I think? So it's been a while.
And Lyft security and NSP before that. So
yes, yeah,
quite a legacy in node security and Node. So cool. Luke, did you want to give a quick update or quick intro?
Yeah, my name is Luke. I'm on the NPM CLI team. I don't have a cool nickname, and I'm working on the doc site right now. So that'll be fun.
Cool. And if we want to go to folks from GitHub, Philip, did you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, I'm Philip, engineer on the package security team at GitHub. Been working on the RFC for linking packages to the source and build, which is on the agenda for today.
Cool. Zach?
Brian, yeah.
Hey, I'm Zach. I'm a product manager at GitHub on the package security team. I'm pretty new to NPM, and I'm here to kind of support the engineering effort in whatever way I can.
And
I'm Brian DeHamer, also working on the package security team with Zach and Philip here at GitHub.
Cool. And then our regular folks, I think, Jordan, do you want to give a quick intro?
Sure. I'm Jordan. I have a bunch of packages on NPM. I've been participating in the RFC calls since their inception, and yeah, something like that, Darcy. And also, I was briefly on the Open SSF board while I was at Coinbase. So I've been paying close attention to their initiatives and trying to provide a sorely lacking NPM perspective in it. And I'm very interested in particular for today's agenda in the linking RFC and how we can achieve that effectively.
Cool. Yeah, Jordan, I noted in the chat here, I think your portfolio of maintained projects is roughly 10% of the ecosystem. I could be wrong if that number is accurate or not, but I know it beats ours 2%. Right?
The last time I did, I saw a measurement. It was around there, but I don't keep track of it day to day.
Yikes. Okay, so we'll have to wrap you in bubble wrap at some point. Cool. Owen, did you want to quickly say hi and do a quick intro?
Oh, sure. Thanks. Yeah, my name is Owen Buckley, primarily a front-end developer. Mostly work in technical architect roles at my companies, and also really like coding on my free time. And so there's the Venn diagram of my interest in NPM. So been a recent attendee. I actually met Darcy at Node.js Interactive 2 or 3 years ago. He was giving a presentation, and yeah, slowly but surely I ended up here. So yeah, it's been fun and cool. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm a member of the package maintenance working group and a number of other Node initiatives I know.
Yeah, that the web components community group as well. So yeah, and sometimes I am allowed to speak on stage at conferences, so that's always appreciated.
Nice. Rick, did you want to give a quick intro? Say hi.
Sure. Hey guys, Rick, an engineer over here at GoDaddy. Just being a good partner and just trying to stay in support with NPM and everything NPM CLI related. Also along with Owen and during part of the package maintenance working group, just making sure we're keeping that in alignment, secure, and just doing the best for our environments. Recent attendee as well for the NPM RFC stuff. Learned it through Darcy and on the package working group, and just want to stay in touch with things and just make sure I'm also keeping these in line for our company and for NPM and everything that's coming up. So appreciate you guys.
Cool. And I think we have a few other folks. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Mihailo. I'm not sure if you want to do a quick intro.
Oh, hi. I honestly, it's my first time here. I just joined I was curious. I don't know what you guys are doing here. I'm interested in nodes, but I see you're such a cool crew with all the experts. I'm gonna be fly on the wall, just listening if you don't mind. And yeah.
That is totally appropriate. Thank you so much for joining. Excited to have you. Eddie, did you want to quickly do an intro?
Sure. I'm Eddie Zaneski. I work for a company called ChainGuard, and I'm a maintainer for the Kubernetes project, and I work on SigStore as well. So I'm here to hopefully be a SigStore reference if anything comes up for y'all.
Awesome. Thanks. Great intros. I appreciate that. We don't do that all the time, but it's nice to give everybody some reference in terms of where we're all coming from. Want to quickly note, I did switch the order here just quickly for the agenda, just so we can get some of the smaller topics out of the way, and then we can jump into probably the larger topic, which is the linking packages to source build, which is the RC 66. But if folks are okay, we'll actually start with the PR 593, And this is just Owen, your only registry dependencies PR. Just want to bubble this up. I'm not sure if there's any updates you want to share, or if we're just essentially in a holding pattern here, or if you've had time to look at npm query or anything like that, or if there's any updates you want to share.
Yeah, this could be quick, but basically yes to all of the above. So has npm query actually been released?
Yeah, so
yeah, it has, right? 8.3 or something.
I think it was 8.16.
Oh wow, way up.
Moving along here. Yeah,
I'll just say 8.x. But yeah, the RFC has been updated to basically kind of swap out its original implementation or proposal for implementation with basically just, hey, you could also just delegate to this npm query. So that's all in there. I mean, basically it's the TLDR is it's ready for review and or merge, all the feedback's caught up. Hopefully all the bike shedding is through. The only question I had is, so the query itself uses the root pseudo selector. And I didn't know if that automatically implies workspaces or not, or if you'd have to do like root workspaces or colon workspaces, or if you just did root and you had workspaces, would it just give you an audit of your entire tree? So that's the only last thing I can think of finishing this up.
Cool. Jordan, go ahead.
So you know how we have semver.npmjs.com, which is a really awesome way of intuitively figuring out how semver ranges work. Is there any way we could have some sort of query.npmjs.com where you type in a package name and a query and it like does it for you?
I love that you bring this up. So Luke, can you give any update on the docs?
Yeah, that's something that I'm working on. The plan's currently for it to be built directly into the docs, like some demos, some examples, but the docs currently need a little bit of architecture love to get those capabilities. So I'm working on that, hopefully going to have something in the next few weeks. But yes, I can reiterate that is a really good idea and something that I want to have.
That's awesome. Yeah, whether it's embedded in the docs or not is sort of, do either or both, but like, please do make it directly linkable. That's what I use the semver.npmjs thing for a lot. Thank you. Glad to hear it's being worked on.
Yeah, this was definitely something that we thought would be helpful for folks to just even play within our docs with query and right there in line be able to test out some of the syntax so that they don't actually have to like update or install like the latest version of npm if they don't want to. So I posted here in chat, yeah, try before you buy. A bit of that I think would be helpful for folks to get familiar with query. We had even played around, or I think Luke and I bounced back the idea of potentially being able to upload a package JSON similar to back your stack, if you've seen that kind of experience, where you can upload a package JSON and be able to figure out which packages you want to essentially go help fund. It'd be nice if we could do that. I think we backed out of that because of computational type things. So I think it's going to be a more limited experience that we build, but it will be something similar, I think, to the idea that of semver.npmjs.com. Go ahead, Phil.
I was just on this RFC for registry dependencies. This sounds great. Would it, like, just skimming through it, like I would kind of want this on npm install, just being able to run npm install and say, just block anything that's not from the registry. My 2 cents.
Yeah, so we've been having the discussion in the last few weeks on this with Owen as well about how we can make this more accessible for folks to write their own kind of policies. I know somebody from Microsoft, I think the OneJS or OneES organization has also poked us on the idea of creating policies backed by npm query. And internally here on our team, we've been discussing how we could potentially help you create essentially like install gates or policies that you could write a query for, and it could become, we could leverage query to help folks write this in a way that doesn't sort of arbitrarily expand the scope of the check. So it's not just like a unbounded execution of code like pre-install is today, but it would be something that's limited to sort of the query syntax that we could essentially help run checks and validation for. Obviously, that's going to slow down your install, but it would, open up some opportunities for folks to write their own kinds of logic into install sort of gates. I guess you could call them install gates. Go ahead, Owen, and then Jordan.
Yeah, I think Philip's question, unless I misunderstood your answer, but this flagging, this check is going to be part of NPM audit, which my understanding is run during NPM install. And so no?
It is run post install. So it's a bit of a gray area. You're right. Yeah.
But to Philip's point, if you run NPM install after this is released, you would get this default output as just a warning, though. I guess that's kind of your intent, Philip, was like just as part of the process, right? I think so. Yeah. And so then going forward, maybe that warning could be turned into an error by default or not. Or there's a lot of opportunities to extend it through query to like CVE signatures, like all sorts of
to elaborate on that. Like, I think the vision that at least I had when we chatted about it in the previous calls is that we would turn NPM audit into a umbrella command that runs all the enabled audit types, and vulnerabilities is the current one, and signatures is the one that we've been working on. And there's a bunch of others we can conceive of, including like dependency types, like only registry deps. And so for breaking change reasons, the default set of audit types that was run in NPM install would just be vulnerabilities, or, for now. And it's set to warn, I think, not fail. And then you'd be able to opt into running additional audit types in install or separately when you ran NPM audit. Like, so there's two different places it could run. And in each place, you could just determine whether it's on warn or fail, which means that, or off. So you can choose to silence anything in either place independently. You can choose to set anything to a warning in either place independently, or turn a thing into a fail in either place independently. And in that way, and then over time through NPM's own SEMVer majors, we can strengthen or make things more strict everywhere in each place independently as we see fit, as seems appropriate, because it won't always be appropriate for everything. But also individuals will just be able to not worry about the defaults and be as strict as they like. And so that will both allow for the maximum strictness, the best defaults, but also not force anyone to check anything they don't have to. That was sort of what I had in mind, and would eclipse all of this kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think unless I'm mistaken, basically, I think now if this RFC in its current form stands, then I think it's maybe the right time to open another RFC that basically describes everything that you said, Jordan. So I think as long as you're still on okay with like a two-step process to get there, or 2FC.
Yeah. And
this is
just acknowledging the reality of totally. And so just acknowledging the reality of my own way of working. If someone else writes that, I am much more likely to fill it in with paragraphs than I am to actually create the skeleton. So feel free to volunteer for that anyway. Sure.
I guess so that's a good point that maybe to wrap up, or Darcy, however you want to wrap it up. But if folks like everything that Jordan just said, then see if you like this in its current form, and then it can be a fixed point for a second RFC to depend on that behavior, like to cover everything that Jordan said. So we can do the two-step. I don't mind seeding that if everybody's okay with this.
Yep. Also, I just shared a link of a work in progress RFC that would, I think, be the follow-up to this. So Jordan, feel free to start to poke at that if you want to. I think it's the ball rolling. We need to obviously round out what the actual API was. This was just something I threw together, shared it internally with our team. But yeah, it's essentially audit policies, trying to document the existing, just like Jordan mentioned, the existing vulnerabilities, warning, check that we do today. And then in the future, providing a way to gate installation based on the query, then that would be, I think, the future. And this kind of aligns actually with the signing / linking RFC that we're going to talk about here in a second. If we can get that metadata into essentially the queryable, like create essentially a selector that we can query that metadata, then we can essentially create a query that would gate based on package build attestations, right? So you could essentially create a new check that would gate. So this is our idea to holistically create policies for people to self-serve or to have some defaults already, which we do have. They just aren't sort of documented in this kind of like way, as Jordan mentioned, like vulnerabilities does exist and it does have a setting or type of warning, but in the future it could also be gating, right? So gating the installation. So not sure if anybody else had any more feedback on that.
The last thing I wanted to throw in there as it relates to that query docs thing that Luke's working on is it'd be really nice to have an API so that I don't have to have a reified node modules in order to do a query against a package's dependency tree. I was looking just for a second ago at like what packages I could essentially delete all the code and replace with npm query calls. And because of that API requirement, I don't think I can do it for any of them. So just throwing that out there. I can write an RFC if that's what would be needed. That's all.
Only thing was, I guess, just back to my original question is colon root pseudo selector all encompassing even in workspaces?
So root is you're only going to want to use root when you directly want to reference like the relationship that the dependencies have to the root. So if you're trying to match direct dependencies, you'll want to use the root selector. You don't need to use it otherwise. If you want to find any and all depths, then you can just remove that. So you don't need root specifically. If you want to find what you're saying is direct workspace dependencies, then you could do :root and then angle bracket dot workspaces, and that will give you all the roots workspaces. Otherwise, I would suggest if you don't care about workspaces and you don't, which I don't think you do, you only care about whether or not the dependency is a git dep, you can just write :type bracket git, and that should give you and then bracket, and that should give you all the git dependencies within the project.
Okay. Okay, so I can just omit. Basically, it sounds like I can just omit I'll paste it in the chat. You can give me a thumbs up, but I'm good.
Okay, great. And yeah, we can take it offline as well. Cool. I want to quickly move on to the next issue. Hopefully can be fast, as you said, Jordan. Tierney's not here to speak to it, but it's the RFC issue 622.
Yeah, I think I can represent it relatively well. So when if you're not using overrides, npm ls gives you your tree, and npm explain something tells you why a thing is in your tree. That's very useful. If you're using overrides, npm ls lies to you. It doesn't tell you that their override is present. And npm explain also doesn't tell you the override is present. And the RFC was about npm ls. I asked about npm explain. It seems to me like npm explain just has a bug. Like it should just tell you this thing would be like this thing is in the graph because of this override that's replacing this in this location, right? And then how straightforward it would be to add that to npm ls, I don't know. But the RFC is like, can we do that? So yeah, it just sort of seems like something that was overlooked in the overrides RFC. Because here's what I found. I mean, yeah, people want to be able to know why something is overridden or like where it came from.
Yeah,
and totally fine if we don't need an RFC per the comment in chat, right? It's just that I suspect that the bike shedding potential is higher for NPM-LS than it is for explain. But
yeah, it seems like it's a bug. We need to fix that. So it's not even, I don't even think it's up for debate. It needs to be represented. Overrides need to be represented in LS output. Also need to be representative in query. So we need to be able to say whether or not, or you can be able to query essentially by whether or not the dep was overridden as well. So it's a good thing to bring to our attention.
Right. And even when querying, an additional wrinkle is you may want to query against what would have been there without the override versus what is there because of the override. So you're kind of having multiple trees to query against potentially, but that's a probably harder problem.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. If there's nothing else from folks, like we'll probably take this one offline async, and it's just something we need to resolve in those commands so that they represent overrides properly. Cool. Let's quickly move on then and try to give this next RFC the most the rest of the time, I think, other than I think the reason why we have singleton packages on here still as an agenda item, I think it was for the folks from Microsoft who were asking about this before. We can probably leave time if we want to at the end, but I doubt there's much new discussion there. So if we want to, we'll dive into RCE 626 for linking packages to their source build. Philip, did you want to quickly maybe give this a high-level synopsis of what the RFC is? And I know there's been some discussion here.
Yes, yeah. Thanks everyone for a huge amount of comments. There's almost 200 comments on the RFC. Yeah, so in summary, the aim is to link public NPM packages that are hosted on the registry to the source code repository and build that it originated from using OIDC ID tokens from a CI/CD system and leveraging SigStore infrastructure to do that, which is kind of aiming to be a software signing service, public good software signing service. So it would be free to use for any ecosystem. And there's a bunch of ecosystems that kind of have expressed interest in using SigStore, but I think it's still pretty early days.
So I wanted to sort of, I have my hand raised so I can sort of ask more foundational questions, I think. The reaction that I've had to a lot of the OpenSSF stuff and to a lot of these sort of broader security initiatives is that they all sound great in theory, but it's not clear that all of the desired links or attestations or verification mechanisms or whatever these things, and I'm not just talking about this RFC, but in general, right? It's not clear that all of them are actually the most important thing to be working on. For example, over the last decade or so of NPM, there's been hundreds and hundreds of theoretical attack surfaces and proofs of concept like produced. But in practice, like virtually none of them have ever been exploited like seriously. Some things certainly have, but the category of thing that tends to actually matter is like a maintainer doing something bad or giving access intentionally to a maintainer who is secretly bad. And neither of those are things that can be easily solved, but there's, you know, I'm not saying that I have an idea of what the better thing is to work on, but like if you separate out those types of attacks, the numbers of attacks, like the categories of attacks that have actually happened that's what I think should be focused on. And so like dealing with theoretical security is sort of, it's kind of just sets off my alarm bells about security theater. And so like as it relates to this RFC, one thing that just popped into my head is, what about all the packages out there without build processes? which is most of the legacy ones, a lot of the ones that are done, most of my own, in theory, you can already verify that the repo that they claim contains the exact copy under that Git tag of the code, and no additional information is necessary. You could do a lot by just building up a database of that without any maintainer action or user action. And it doesn't seem like that's been done. It's like in other words, I think that maximally backfilling existing packages should be a very high priority, almost more so than how do you annotate new packages. Even though I can understand the urge to like stop the bleeding and so on, anything that doesn't do a backfill is not a complete solution, especially in an ecosystem like NPM, where you have lots of finished modules and you have lots of modules that work perfectly and have zero security bugs and whose maintainers are dead or retired, or one of them has even given up, like they transferred all of their packages to an account that they then destroyed the credentials to do, so nobody can ever touch them again. So like those are perfectly secure and can never be compromised. And yet, like all of these new types of processes don't really account for them. So I kind of wanted to hear a little more about like, what are the actual concrete attacks that have happened that this will prevent, not just the theoretical security that this may provide.
Yeah, I mean, one of them is around like package hijacking attacks that usually happen because of stolen credentials.
Right.
And they often happen when like a malicious attacker would steal some NPM credentials, take some existing package and modify the code on their laptop, and then publish that modified version to the registry. So with this proposal, like the link itself doesn't prevent that kind of attack, but if you actually added the link and then enforced that it was there for subsequent publishers, for example, and maybe gated disabling it behind 2FA, it would prevent an attacker from just uploading random code from their laptop to the registry.
I mean, I think that because of the developer friction that different credentials adds, since I'm, so I'll speak for myself. I'm using two-factor everywhere that has it. I am using a password manager and not repeating passwords and all those best practices. If somebody steals my NPM credentials alone, they cannot alter my GitHub repos. And so, they could do the attack you're talking about, and they wouldn't be able to hide it in the repo or anything, and they wouldn't be able to act as me for GitHub. So I can see that helping that, but because I have two-factor, and that's now mandatory for anything that, for a list of packages that matter, and that will, I believe, soon be growing to everything. In order for them to compromise my credentials and have it matter, they would also have to compromise my two-factor, which means they either have my physical phone, which means they have my email and everything, or it means they've compromised my email and thus have everything. So and if they have my email, they also have my GitHub. They have, right? And although I'm sure there are some people who, out of caution/paranoia, have a different email account for each service, the vast majority of people do not. And so I'm just kind of wondering how likely, it has happened a few times where somebody has modified the code locally and not pushed it to GitHub and published. But the solutions that to me intuitively seem achievable for that is that if the package doesn't have a build process, then you can just just in general, you can compare and see if they're exactly the same. And that means that only things with a build process are left, or things with, or malicious code. And then if you build a service that independently tries to replicate the build process of a published package and uses heuristics to figure out how, because it's not going to be exact, but how close you get to the actual published output, then that would probably just work for all of the build process packages and eliminate, and there'd be some overlap where there would probably be some valid code packages that were marked as bad because the build process was not deterministic enough and the attack code was subtle enough. But like, I think the vast majority of attacks would be caught by that approach. And then you wouldn't have to make any registry changes, any changes for maintainers. And the change for users would be like, once the data existed, how do I want to check for it on install? Like, has something like that been thought about?
I mean, quick note before Zach, I think, has his hand up. I mean, I know Microsoft have actually done this for a huge number of NPM packages. I'm not sure what the percentage they got to, but I think maybe it was over 60% reproducibility. It would be cool to use that data and backfill provenance information.
Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, I mean, these are great questions. So I think the short answer is there is such a partially overlapping set of circumstances that there isn't one single approach that's going to work in all cases. So if you have a package that doesn't have a build system, we could talk about in parallel, building a system that does this source comparison in the repo to the package. Especially for legacy packages that are very unlikely to receive any updates in the future. In terms of reproducible builds, it's sort of an open question. It's definitely not going to work in all cases for NPM packages. And then this is playing a bit of a long game in terms of establishing a new security capability that could be adopted by the ecosystem over time. It absolutely is not a one-size-fits-all solution to all of our security problems. And this is why, in parallel, there's so much work going on to help improve the availability of like multi-factor, like the recent adding of like WebAuthn and other sort of account security mechanisms. Even if today, well, I think there probably have been instances where a developer was accessing their account and decided to, push some malicious changes to the package, but not necessarily to the repo. But even today, if those attackers were doing it primarily by pushing to the repo and then, having it go live, as we build our defenses, attacks become more sophisticated. And to me, it isn't much of a leap of saying that even if today the malicious code is mostly being pushed to the repo first and then goes to the package, that in the future, unless we do something, people could, attack or they could push the malicious changes directly to the package instead of pushing it to the repo. It's interesting to think about how we might want to do these things in parallel, but I don't think there's any one solution we've described yet on this call that would cover all the use cases of trying to detect malicious code being pushed.
A scenario I'm particularly concerned about is creating perverse incentives that try to force the ecosystem in a direction. So, for example, one of my concerns with NPM's website adding the types, like the TypeScript logo on packages when they had types, was that it should also include things that have definitely typed packages, because if it didn't, that would be heavily penalizing packages that do not ship types in the package. And we don't need to get into all the details of what's better or worse there, but with the current scenario, a maintainer doesn't have to change anything about their own package to get that logo. Somebody just has to make the types for it in DT. And so while I still don't think it's perfect, I think that there hasn't been too many negative unintended consequences of that badge being present as a result. So similarly, if attestations can only be achieved and you get a little badge on your profile page, or you get, if you don't have that status, then you get noise on your consumers' consoles about your package, right? That's essentially punishing the people who don't jump through all the hoops. And I have been publishing, so I am personally someone who will probably, when it becomes actually secure and viable, start publishing from a repeatable system like CI. However, I have been publishing for a decade from my local machine in a way that is objectively trusted, because people do trust it. It's and it works, and it has not gone wrong. And to penalize me, if for some reason I don't want to publish in CI yet, to penalize all of my packages because I've done that, I don't think that makes the ecosystem better. I think that puts a sour taste in maintainers' mouths about security, and actually causes more harm than none of that security at all, which is one of my complaints about the CVE ecosystem, is that the false positives, I think, cause more damage to the concept of security than a lack of alerts would. And so, like, I generally speaking am concerned about anything that, yeah, I think I've spoken in circles. So like that's sort of why I'm mentioning these things in parallel and talking about, like, how can we, with zero additional action, thinking of a better term than grandfather, legacy, like promote, like grant for free all of the existing packages, the appropriate statuses when applicable, so that those who want to can opt into the newer approaches, but so that most cases don't have to. I think that's a really important goal that should be had here, even if it makes it more difficult or slower.
Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, these are great points. So it's certainly an anti-goal of this project would to be like put a lock icon or say like this is secure because it does this thing. You know, we're trying to forge one link in a chain between the source repo and the package. But you know, of course, there's limits to what that link can attest, and so we don't want, like, you know, I don't know, some sort of like thumbs up or like verified secure, you know, type language. So we want to be very careful about how we're phrasing this in the both in the CLI and in the registry web interface. Yeah, I don't think we've given a lot of thought to what this would look like for legacy projects and the like scoping out the amount of work to try to create this relationship for packages without any changes. So that's certainly something I think we might have to spend more time looking into to have a better answer.
I'm not sure if anybody else had any comments to that. I apologize there, Jordan. I missed the beginning of your statements there as I was dealing with some audio issues. So just if you can, make sure notes are accurate and feel free to
take a look,
add. Yeah, apologies. Did anybody else have time to look this over? I know it's a pretty dense RC as well, or if anybody else had any comments or feedback on this. I know it's something that we'll likely keep on the agenda for the next few weeks here for sure. Want to make sure that there's enough time for people to give feedback and also ask questions, I know. I think like your questions on incentives, Jordan, are good. And then also in terms of the attack, prevention, like what are the attack vectors that are being prevented by these capabilities? Those are the right things to push on here. Yeah, the sort of use cases that I end up finding myself falling into for why this is beneficial is mostly like auditing, gating based on build attestations or the lack thereof is like, I think, a long way out. So like, I don't think this would be need to be like a requirement or be something that was punitive for the ecosystem today. Right. So I think it's a long way out before we would ever consider that. Which might be like a way to also like make this more digestible in terms of the phased approach that's being presented is to add support into the subcommand, the npm audit signature subcommand, so that, you know, it's sort of testing the waters there. And then we can, again, with the idea of like more holistic audit policies or gates or things like that, we could eventually like graduate that into something that was like a default gate or thing that we're checking for.
And so something I wanted to add is the recent addition to the npm website to like actually link my GitHub and Twitter account. there's a lot more that I think could be done there to build a foundation, to build the next link in the chain, to be able to link a project to an organization account instead of just a user accounts, to be able to indicate which maintainers of a package have linked their GitHub, to be able to indicate which person published which version, and had they linked their GitHub at that time, or was it published with two-factor? I don't know, maybe that one's trickier, but like all of these pieces, because at a certain point, when you have all of that information, it becomes really easy to see it becomes a lot easier to see when somebody who shouldn't be there is there before you've even gotten into attestations and verifying them. And so that, like, again, like another thing that could be done in parallel and possibly should be that, is sort of increasing that stuff. You could also, one more thing, you could also verify that the NPM publisher has write access or higher on the repo, which won't always necessarily be the case, but is probably almost always the case. And
yeah,
that's something GitHub can do with it publicly with its APIs, let alone internally.
Yeah, again, like things that are often fishy, like a new tracking down when a new user has been added to maintain or be given access to publish to a package is definitely something that should be like a heuristic that we should be mindful of whenever that changes, and then somebody quickly publishes is sort of like a bit of a policy, or like it's a smell, right? It's a code smell essentially. And I think what we're presenting here is the idea of being able to add more information into sort of a public record or ledger about when those actions are being taken, allows for some transparency for folks to monitor when that's happening. And this is essentially where all this work stems from, is the idea of a transparency logs and having monitors as well, so that you can quickly react to that. Again, like you're asking, I think, some good questions about what other work are we doing in this space that is maybe adjacent to this, which might be beneficial to maybe prioritize even. But I think it's valid to say that there's work we could do that shores things up from a standpoint of like monitoring these actions, like when somebody gets added to like an NPM package, like what kind of signal do I have today, and do I just have to be essentially like polling even this ledger in the future? Do I have to be polling or monitoring this in the future? Like what is it that we as the source and the home for this information and these changes going to do to help end users not have to even just start pulling this information in a different place?
I mean, I would say from a technical level, every time meaning any NPM user who has connected GitHub, logs in or publishes, you should be able to at that time make a ping to the API and see, do I have which repos do I have write access to, or do I have write access to this repo or whatever? And when somebody is added as an NPM owner, ping the API right then. Make sure that they have access to the repo that the package is linked to, right? And that could be done in it's tricky to do this in a way that doesn't privilege GitHub, but GitHub is sort of unavoidably privileged already. And I'm sure that there are, and it could, I think, very in a straightforward manner, be extended to authenticate with GitLab and with wherever else. Anything that provides these abilities, you just say, well, yeah, you can link your GitLab account and then you can use the GitLab API, right? And I'm sure there's probably some biz dev problems there to work out but I mean, technically speaking, it should be straightforward. I don't know, I think that there's like the two-factor requirement is such a minor inconvenience that it's reasonable, albeit sometimes annoying, to force maintainers to do it, right? But because it's not revealed who has two-factor and who doesn't, even before it became mandatory, it wasn't really that it didn't really matter because like if you didn't want to use it, you didn't use it, and if you chose like, but you weren't like forced into using it. So it was just like, okay, I have to open this app on my phone and take 3 extra seconds when I'm doing a special action, right? And I would think similarly, okay, fine, I have to connect my GitHub. And then, okay, before I add someone as an NPM owner, I have to go add them to the repo. Like all that stuff seems relatively low cost to ask a maintainer to do. It's low friction, and it doesn't change anything fundamental about most of the workflows. It's just a few extra bits of information to check. And I suspect that in practice, that would actually catch most of the problematic scenarios that have actually happened. Or at least highlight what, like, it would make it really a lot easier to figure out what had happened after the fact, because you can see, oh, well, this person, like this publisher was added to GitHub. Let's go look. Oh, they were just added recently. Maybe that like the maintainer was tricked or something, like it becomes a lot easier, I think, to piece that together when you have that sort of a more public audit log. Like the fact that it's obscure knowledge that you can type npm like info package name time and figure out date and time and publisher of each package. Like it's not easy to find that information out otherwise. And like being able to also find out if did they have write access on the GitHub repo at the time it was published, that adds a lot of ability to recover. Someone can interrupt me at any point. I'm just kind of rambling now.
Yeah, so we have about 5 minutes left. I just want to be mindful of that. But what I will say is, I think there's a lot here. Obviously, 200 comments. We don't have quite everybody on this call. I think that was given feedback. Time zones can be a hard thing to manage here. So just want to make sure that everybody feels free to continue to give the feedback that you're giving even here, Jordan, like back in async manner to the RFC itself, so we can improve it and make sure everybody's thoughts and feedback are being added there. I guess what you're speaking to, Jordan, as well, in terms of that like transparent audit log, is there any concern? And for me, this is my biggest concern with this work, with having introducing a new third party or source of truth, and essentially keeping this information housed in a net new host. Is that of any concern to folks? The fact that audit log in the future is essentially being proposed as the home of where we will be adding those types of logs. And if folks have followed this RC to an extent, you will find like the infrastructure that's behind this Sigstore, and underneath that, the Trillion server. Is there any concerns there? I've seen performance issues open for the last few years, actually, with some folks having some problems with that. Like my biggest concern is more the vendor that is going to be responsible for maintaining the infrastructure than it is actually, and also where they will be able to operate. So from sort of an org and consumer concern, like if I'm a business, do I trust this new party that's going to have to operate, and what's their SLOs type thing? So that for me, that might get resolved easily through the OpenSSF or Sigstore essentially presenting sort of united information about how this is going to be operated. But because it's net new, there's a lot of questions I have about the long-term viability of this net new source of truth to be housing this information. So just to show my own cards here, like that's my biggest concern. The actual concept I think is a good one, though, and I think it does add something that again is not going to be all consuming. I think Zach said it right. Like this isn't a silver bullet. There's going to be a number of different things that we're going to introduce here, and hopefully the community is seeing that we're continuing to invest in essentially supply chain security. So similar to what I guess you were saying, Jordan, like in the future, potentially a login activity, a add user activity, those types of things could be added to the transparency log. Right now, we're just speaking to publish, but that doesn't have to be the case in the future. Any other feedback before we sort of wrap here, at least for today's call? I know I want to give a huge shout out to Philip and his team here, Brian as well. I know has done a bunch of work on the Sigstore.js implementation, which got, I think, transferred to the Sigstore org. So we'll just want to say huge congrats to all the work that they're doing, and appreciate them pushing on this. Especially Philip, I know this has taken a long time to put together, and you've had a number of conversations internally. So now it's fun. You get to chat about this externally, I know. So I think GitHub's having a little hard time even rendering the RFC, at least because of the comments. So ideally, that's a good metric to track of popularity of this. So. Cool. What I think we'll do is we'll keep this on the agenda, and then hopefully this becomes a good grounds for discussion async in the RFC repo itself. We might have to poke our peers internally at GitHub to see what's going on with performance of the actual discussion. We might have to pivot. A PR may not be the right place to be having these kinds of back and forths. Discussions might be a better avenue. But just want to thank everybody for jumping on today. If you didn't get a chance to bubble up any concerns or thoughts, feel free to do that async. And then hopefully we'll see you next week at the same time, same place. What also is sort of an opportunity here is based on the traction that is on this RFC, you may want to do a separate, dedicated deep dive call, which I know we've done in the past historically on this, which might also allow for certain folks to join that are in different time zones. I know that Wednesdays at 2 p.m. are not ideal for 2 p.m. Eastern are not ideal for everybody. So I may open an issue just asking for input and maybe do a bit of a poll to see if there's another time that folks would like to potentially jump on, so we can have as many folks as we can in these synchronous calls giving feedback. So so I'll take that as an A to try to set up as well. Great. Appreciate everybody for jumping on today, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Cheers.